Good afternoon. Welcome to all of you into this wonderful speaker auditorium. I'm Rich Lyons, Dean of the Business School here at the Haas School. Very quickly, we were up here with Kevin and Connie Chu, who named this building. And it was just about 3 weeks ago, and most of you know this room just opened a couple of weeks ago. But Connie was up here, and she was in this space, and she was looking around, and she said, "Feels like a treehouse." And I thought, what a great metaphor. When was the last time you didn't have fun in a treehouse? And it does feel that way. Look, today is our speaker, our guest, Jonathan Bush. He is the Chief Executive Officer, President, and Chairman of the Board of Directors at athenahealth, as you know. He co-founded the company, that was 1997, took it public in 2007, the most successful IPO of that year. Today, athenahealth remains one of the healthcare information technology industry's fastest growing companies. Like many of the entrepreneurs of our time, his success was born from failure. His original business model, birthing clinic with the idea of franchising a network of clinics that viewed pregnancy holistically. He soon realized that his birthing clinic vision was challenged by his business's own inability to track outstanding claims to insurers and to get paid in a reasonable time frame. The challenge ultimately would shape the formation of athenahealth, a company focused on creating a true win-win marketplace that enables a broad and efficient exchange of health information. He is passionate about all things healthcare. His experience in the sector extends beyond the evolution of athenahealth. Previously, he served on the front lines of healthcare as an EMT for the city of New Orleans. He was trained as a medic in the U.S. Army and worked as a management consultant in healthcare practice at Booz Allen. A well-recognized innovator, disruptor, his vision has been chronicled in the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, NPR, many places. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in the College of Social Studies from Wesleyan and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Jonathan has been described as colorful, eccentric, a leader who aims to foster a culture of irreverence to the status quo, all in the name of reforming U.S. healthcare system and through innovation. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Bush. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is exciting. It's definitely a treehouse. A very cool treehouse with Bay Bridge and all that. I love the defining principles. We have our own that we try to spend time on. So I'm going to give you PowerPoint. That's what people are into in order to really challenge the boundaries. But this time it's on a cool multimedia wall. And it's really cool, you'll see. So in general, and I'm going to, because it's Berkeley, let's free associate a little bit. Like business is one form of social organizing to give value and purpose and focus. But there are others, religion and politics, political orders, social orders. In all of them, I think there is in common the desire to have unlimited opportunity, some sense of a grand, wide open road ahead. And war and general sort of non-success in business or religion or society comes when the road kind of isn't so clear and you don't see for yourself or your tribe or your family or whatever it is that wide open road. And so what I think of at work every day, my number one job is to find a way to have just unlimited, unplowed fields to go and get. That fundamentally the American experience so far, in its good days, has been about all those miles of wide open prairie, all them gold in them there hills somewhere, right? That created this idea that, hey, I'm okay with you being here too. I'm okay with you being different from me because we both got so much shit out there to go and get. I'm probably going to get more than you, no offense, but it's okay because you'll have plenty, right? And when we get someone who gets that plenty, we celebrate them. We think this guy's a genius. It's the guy or girl who's done this, and we are proud and excited by their fortune and their bounty. And one of them was, is it Mark Cuban? Wasn't he the CEO of Blockbuster? And Blockbuster got to $5 billion, and it's not Mark? I thought it was Mark Cuban. Anyway, we literally forgot him already. That's amazing, right? Because every bit, you could not go to a business school class without hearing a case on Mark Cuban's amazing, and Blockbuster's amazing, and it's because of Mark Cuban and his unique approach to culture at Blockbuster, whatever that was. And then, boom. Mark who? Was he the guy? I don't remember. And what I find interesting in these stories is, in the Cuban story and others where people kind of, their wide open road gets smaller and more occluded, and eventually they're sort of scrambling and tussling against, they're turning negative. What is it that happened? Is it the leader? I'm particularly interested if it's the leader, because I'm sort of, for the time being, the leader. And that would suck if it was that, and then I did it. But what are the other conditions that create it? And also, I think, I feel I'm a fiduciary to doctors and hospitals in medicine in a lot of what we do, and I'm worried about it for them too. Are they going to be stuck in a closed road where they start to act kind of evil to their neighbor? So it's going down, things are doing badly, and then in 2007, they're like, we are going to break through here. We're going to get, the solution is to the declining use of our stores is to get more people into our stores, so we're going to offer free candy. That was the big strategy. And then when that did not keep them, they said, let's open more stores, but they'll be smaller and in more places. And then they'll go to our stores, which today seems like a really dumb strategy. And, that's because we know about that. There is one Blockbuster, by the way. I gave this speech to one of our client forums, and there was a guy, and he's like, it's not closed. It's a guy back there, and he runs a hospital in Anchorage, Alaska. And they didn't get the memo. They're still open, and it's a Blockbuster, and you can get, So, anyway. Now Netflix is the genius, right? It's all about Reed, and he wears, great suits, and he's new age, and, it all started with Reed leaves a DVD in the couch. You know the story? He leaves it in the couch, and finally he's like, finds it. It's like, oh, shit. He takes it back to Blockbuster, $36.50. He says, what? The video couldn't have cost you more than $10. I rented it for $2. What do you mean, sir? Well, 12 late days plus the thing, and, lost video filing fee. And it's like, there should be a business where there's no late fees for videos. Along comes Reed, starts mailing you. Does everyone remember the way it began? I don't remember. Am I being aged here? Okay. The paper envelopes with the thing, and you can keep as long as you want. And just, if you want another, send it in, we'll give you another, right? And it's banging along, and the Blockbuster doesn't give a damn, right? Because they're like, yeah, little honey badger down here. That's weird with the envelopes, and who uses the mail anyway? And then all of a sudden, he gets to start to stream it. So the first trade is, I'm going to give you the ability to not use the store in exchange for you not getting what you want as fast, right? And then he says, but wait, how about this? You can not use the store and get what you want faster. You don't even have to get your ass off the couch, as long as you can reach the laptop. And then it gets to mobile devices, and it's like, you don't even have to be on the couch. You don't even need to reach the laptop. And, today it's a third of the whole internet. And so as we sit in our treehouse looking around at, I look at healthcare, but it's something that you can see in all kinds. You want to say, who else is a Blockbuster? Who's getting all the articles and buying for professional football teams and, being considered kind of a magnate who's about to wake up dead? And could I be the person to kill him in a lovely, useful, productive challenging the status quo, students first, be on yourself kind of way. And of course, to me, Donald Trump is a metaphor for what happens when there isn't open road, where people, forget him, if you can, just for 1 minute. What he represents, what that sort of movement, whatever, that energy represents is this sense that there isn't wide enough open road and it's a zero-sum game. And, it's not, maybe I'll get more than you, but don't worry, we're both going to get plenty. It's like you might be eating my food. And so now I'm like, I need a wall where you can't get to the food that I want, or videos, or whatever, or jobs, right? And this happens not just, it's happening, maybe it happened a little to our country right now. Maybe it's happened in various times around the global economy. But it happens all the time. It's a phenomenon. I gave it a name because I work in healthcare. I gave it a name that sounds like a doctor would use it, URQS. You've got a cute kid, it's a URQS, and I think it's progressing to the lower bowel. So what I mean by that is upper right quadrant syndrome. Upper right quadrant, right, in all the graphs at business school, you guys still allow graphs, and, why do you think it's a graph? Why should it be graphed? I don't know, just seemed to go. You do this and it's good, right? If you go up and to the right, it's good. Until what? Until you're at the right and the up and there's nowhere to go, right? There's gold and then there are hills. Yeah, actually, I went through all the hills and there's 7 pounds left. Oh, get out of here. You want to beat them. So there's Blockbuster, right? They got a lot of market share around those stores. They didn't have a lot of extra room. The 5,900 stores, there wasn't room for another 15,000 stores in the United States. And so somebody comes up and says, I'm not going to play that. I'm going to play that where there's many, many, many more gold hills and many, many, many more ounce of gold, which is not the screens that have the VHS connected to them. I'm going to use every piece of glass in the world. And it suddenly opens up a vastly larger addressable market. He can still be a third of the internet, and he's now creating his own content. It goes on, right? Microsoft. I know this is going to be really hard for you guys to swallow, but there was a point, at one point when I was alive, when Microsoft was cool. Bill Gates left college to start Microsoft. People would leave college to go to Microsoft. The campus was cool. They had driverless buses. And it was a big deal. And they did that, had that cool energy until almost exactly they got to 50% or 60% global market share of the PC operating systems. And what happened was, just like with Blockbuster, some weird animal dinosaur instinct kicked in, that zero-sum game, URQS energy that said, oh shit, there's not actually wide open space ahead of us. We're at billions and billions of revenues in most of the PCs in the world, and at this growth rate, in a small number of years, we're out of room, right? There's nothing more to sell. And that's URQS, right? Same idea. What do? We got to sell it to them again. So there was a period where everybody in the world, had to go and buy it all again. They had a new thing called Windows 95. And it looked a little bit like this thing that everyone's metrosexual cousin had, but no one actually had themselves. He's like really good at graphic design. He's so smart, and I like everything he has. He has this Mac, And so we're going to do a Mac-like user experience, right? And everybody in the world had to go buy another one, and they got another lift. And it was even more profitable because they didn't really have to do a lot of R&D to just copy the UX. And then they ran out of room again, and they're like, shit, we got to do it again. So they did Windows 97, which was the same as Windows 95, but there was this annoying paper clip that would ride around in circles. But little by little, as the notion that there's not untapped wide open markets settled in, the company acted a lot less cool. They kept forcing everyone to buy shit they didn't want. They used their legal department more. They engaged in more monopolistic practice because they were getting trapped. They didn't have that, come hither with me, I have seen this wide open field that we can all eat on for years and years to come. They weren't giving credits and generous to customers, and their marketing campaigns weren't very spiritual or good. And they were dominating until what? What was it? Yeah, what was it? No, because they killed Apple for years. iPod. They didn't sell better video stores. They took the video out of the store, didn't they? They didn't sell better computing systems. They took the computing out of the system. We probably still have laptops because we're in business school, but we don't use them. We compute 20 times as much as we did when we first got our laptop. But it's, during boring meetings. Go ahead. It's boring. I'm with you, sister. I do it all the time. No, I say that too. I say that too. I'm taking notes. I swear. Look. But it's true. He created a wide open, and talk about culture. Like, this is one of the things, I believe your dean is big into culture. I'm big into culture. But what I found interesting about Apple is they actually had a pretty exciting, positive culture. But what was it? Why were people still psyched? I mean, he was smart and creative and edgy, but really he found a giant, wide open prairie to go get. He reopened the possibility of that open-ended American dreamy type, come hither with me and there's a better way for all of us to prosper in energy. Which I think is interesting because we study, well, what was his behavior? Was he good or bad? Or she was, did charity work? Right? Comcast, YouTube, right? Same thing. They have all the cable boxes. We don't need the cable box. They have all the channels, 685 channels of dumb shit, But that's only because, and there's just not so much better, except that there's 800 million channels, right? I know that 500 million of them are like the cat that carries the dog up the stairs, look, go, Binty. But the open-endedness of that creates a wide open opportunity. Enterprise software. Once everybody in a vertical buys, once a winner is picked, or two, or triopoly, whatever you want, everyone's got one. They raise the price. Now it's, people, hospitals with, half-empty beds are spending over $1 billion on a copy of software in an internet era, a pre-internet. There's only so much room raising price and offering candy or whatever else can do before something that's wide open just changes the frontier. Now let's look at the actual delivery of healthcare itself with this concept. So here are medical centers acquiring practices, spiked by the High-Tech Act. Obama, had the big, if you follow all these really complicated rules, and buy systems and use them according to my definition, you'll get $40 billion. And so doctors were like, you do it. And they sold their practices. So you have now a very highly concentrated, smaller number of vertical monopoly players that are in the upper right quadrant of their market. Big, attractive medical centers. And they're growing, but you can see they're growing slower, right? The things attached to hospitals are growing, but they're growing slowly. Then there's a whole generation of folks that are disattached from hospital stays. Those doctors all lock themselves into Blockbuster. They're the free candy or whatever. We're going to be the mail-in video, and we're going to open a retail clinic or an urgent care. They can do 85% of what a emergency room can do for a fraction of the cost in 2 minutes, with 2 minutes of wait time, probably actually right off the throughway in what used to be a Blockbuster, right? They literally got the lease. One of our clients literally has the master lease from Hollywood Videos, and they just went into every Hollywood video and put an urgent care in. And then look at this one. just recently, streaming visits. Look at the growth rate on that bad boy. It's an interesting concept, right? And let's look inside a Blockbuster. 35.3% of hospital beds are fully funded and empty every night. 27% of calendars in these doctors' offices, obviously if you want an appointment in the future, they're completely sold out. But if you look back over the last month at what they actually did, because people have to show up and park and go and follow the Greenberg elevator line to the Smith Pavilion to go to the place where you get a clipboard to rewrite down everything that you typed into Epic last time you were there. There's a lot of shrinkage. There's a lot of drips between the lip and the cup. There are 2 entire sets of medical equipment in the United States for every time we use it. Now, they're all required to evaluate their quality, and everybody gets in the mail on paper surveys, and the 1/3 of 1% of people fill them out who have time to fill out paper surveys and have been to a mailbox to open an envelope. So the fact that we're still averaging this level of satisfaction is like saying, boy, that was the best vegan pizza. I'm glad you laughed. I was terrified with this slide because it's Berkeley, and I'm like, what? I love vegan pizza. So that's the concept that's going on in medicine and in many other sectors. We could do this all night, right, with different sectors that are sort of getting locked up in upper right quadrant syndrome, and then somebody's virtualizing the experience and creating a new frontier, right? So what do we do about it? We're in an interesting place. We're kind of the South African weapons, dealer. We sell to all sides of the battle. We sell to the hospitals, that are trying to get fuller and buying the doctors. We sell to the retail clinics, and we sell to the virtual medicine. Our goal is to try to get each of them to recreate as much of that lower left quadrant feel as they can, to virtualize what they do as much as possible so that they can be what's left as the disruption occurs. So one is they have to cut their costs. The other is that they have to find a way to get new market share out of their zip code. And the last is they need to innovate the way they deliver care, basically digitize it. So we go through and we find the things that they do and we say, can we do them for them? So in 2017, hospital-based doctors on multi-million-dollar enterprise software computer systems average 1,154 faxes a month. Now, a fax is, do you know? Because I haven't seen one in like 5 years. So one of the things we do is we forward the phone numbers of their clinics and read their faxes, literally type them in to virtualize that. But there are claim forms and audits. Has anyone been given a clipboard recently at a clinic that you've already been to? Yeah. So we have to keep chipping away at these and virtualizing the operational ingredients to care. The other is to disrupt their calendar. What in their calendar was something that really needed you to pound your way into that clinic and sit there with your knickers down on butcher paper having done this clipboard thing? And what could you have just done on your iPhone? If they don't Netflix themselves, my argument is someone's going to Netflix them for them. So one of the things we've done is we've taken all the calendars of there's about 9,200 medical groups of different sizes and shapes on athenahealth today. About 13% of all visits to the doctor happen on our backbone. But each one of the 9,200 practices has their own little calendar in their table space on the app. And each one of them has invented their own names for all the appointments that a person might need. And if you add up all the names for all the appointments that all of the clients have invented, there are 135,000 different things that you could buy called a doctor's appointment in athenahealth, and that's ridiculous. So what we've done is untethered the calendar, created another national one, and said, you can use your little calendar if you want, but we're going to just have 10 appointment types, and we're going to attach this to Yelp and Amazon and Apple and places where people who shop are. And we're going to start serving up appointments. And if you want to sign up just like a restaurant on Open Table, we'll let you, for free. You can get these appointments. And if you want to have a button that says you could do it virtually, we'll enable that too. So I don't know how much of this is going to be used by folks that are in the upper right quadrant of their market to disrupt themselves, and how much of this is going to be used by new entrepreneurial caregivers that are going to disrupt them. But anyway, this is what's happening, and we're going to make it happen on our network. And we're starting to get a lot of interest. Everybody wants, if it's an everything store and it doesn't have $3 trillion worth of healthcare in it, it ain't much of an everything store. And the last thing is, we need to make sure we do that to ourselves. So to beat Epic and Cerner and then just be an Epic and Cerner on the internet would be lame, right? We need to make sure that the millions of different products that don't exist because it's too hard to sell and install and implement in medicine, they're nonprofit, they're in the upper right quadrant, they're not desperate to act. There's all kinds of regulatory barriers. There's the Hippocratic Oath. Well, I don't want to make a mistake here. I have to be really super careful. And so what we've done is basically rebuilt this beautiful thing, which started as this, which was a little calendar for our birth center. And we've added a lot of stuff to athenahealth. It's like 4 million lines of code. And you have to spend 2 years just figuring out how to use it without breaking something else. And so we're rebuilding it as a series of microservices. We're basically taking the data out of the customer's table space, making a single national master patient index. There are 100 million patients on athenahealth. That's 9 Kaiser Permanentes, 12 Departments of Defense, 1.25 British health systems, National Health Services. Separate that from the analytics, and then start to let other people build apps and services besides us. So we now have 2 electronic medical records that are competitive with ours, that you can buy, that our customers can buy from us instead of us. There are 145 companies that sell and build in this way. And as we get more good at opening up the code and basically turning our architecture into a set of microservices that other people can use, we expect more and more and more of what people buy to be not stuff that we buy, not stuff that we make, excuse me. Hopefully we'll make some good stuff too, and some things will be ours, I hope. But I think that I don't know, I'm experimenting with the notion that if you start now saying I never want to be in upper right quadrant, then you can go longer. And I think that's what Amazon has done, right? 65% of what's bought on Amazon is a competitive product to what Amazon sells. And that open road goes from feeling like that, where people live in that, walking in groups like that, back to that. So that's my idea. I'm told you're a talkative group and to leave time for questions. I hope I did. I sort of blanked out. How long have I been here? I'm thrilled to have that much eye contact. I feel like you've got this, and I'm thrilled to be in this conversation with you. Good. So I'm told to direct you to the mic. The acoustics here are perfect, but this is obviously being live streamed worldwide to all the people.
Who's got a question? Maybe I'll open.
You'll have to prime the pump.
As some people gather.
Shy group.
I'm giving a lecture tonight on blockchain of all things.
Yeah.
As you think about sort of coding information in interesting ways, is that becoming fundamental to you?
Yeah. So yes, blockchain's a 2-part deal, and in the case of an upper right quadrant like medicine, upper right quadrant battle like medicine, you have to get to the people that are in the upper right quadrant. You can't just start again with the Netflix users. You have to actually get the users out of Blockbuster, as it were. And so for a while, we have to connect to big databases of Epic and Cerner, et cetera, to provide what we do. There's recently some laws that make them not allowed to block us. But still, in order to get in, we got to use their technology. And that involves, for example, you get a patient who's, maybe they have a maiden name, or maybe there's, initial different, or they change cell phones, or, and so we have to make judgment calls. We do, if a 6-point match is considered a perfect match, a 3-point match is considered something to go into a queue to be evaluated. Can we call this the same person, right? Everyone's like, why is medicine so disconnected? It's because of all this stuff. If over time people subscribe to a key, and of course the blockchain is just the coolest, best key logic we've come up with, that whole layer of figuring out who's who and tracking them across the landscape just goes from 450 people barely making a dent in it at Athena. There are 450 people in a group called IS, Integration Services, trying to find and match people between different systems. That would go away. So I think it's a very powerful concept, and I think it will happen. I think people will subscribe to keys. We've got usernames and passwords. We've got sign-on with Facebook. It's not hard for us. It's not hard for me to imagine us adopting that kind of logic. It's a good question. You want to? Oh, there's one. This guy's actually going to the mic, so he trumps you, who did not want to push.
Hey, Jonathan. My name is Patrick.
Hey, Patrick.
MBA, MPH student, along with Paul and Catherine, your alumni.
All fellow Athenista. He will sell you on the company if you want to come where the weather is nicer.
In Boston.
In Boston. Please come immediately, like in the next 30 days for your interview. Or in 9 months, either one. Yeah.
So 2 questions. So I read your book in 2014.
Best question so far. Available, streaming on Amazon.
So the 2 questions are about the book. First is, what was it like writing it, and after writing it, how did that sort of play into you and your life? Second question, you talked about in the book innovating from the edges, and you talked about the rich profit belly of healthcare being waste, representing an opportunity for entrepreneurs. How has that opportunity set evolved since you wrote the book, I guess, a few years ago?
Well, the great thing about healthcare is you can be like 20 years late to everything and still be a freaking visionary, right? And partly this is cultural, right? We as a society view the support of our major healthcare institutions as eleemosynary, as good. You go into a medical center at Stanford and everything's named after someone like you're at a university. Even though, in fact, Stanford is acting in a more evil and monopolistic way than John D. Rockefeller would ever do. And I love Stanford, and I love everyone there, and I love everyone at Mass General who rips off all the plumbers in Boston by charging $2,000 for a mammogram that costs them $100. But they need to feed that beast to stay alive. They're trapped in upper right quadrant syndrome, and that remains true, right? You have a weird irony of nonprofit medicine being currently kind of the most avaricious profiteers in the medical food chain, vastly more conscious and planful in their efforts to rip people off than Martin Shkreli could ever be. But blame not the bird of prey. I mean, once you get over the idea that the cultural norm that everything they do is good because they're saving people's lives, then it's fine. It's just like saying General Motors is trying to charge more for their next car. Yeah, of course they are. They're General Motors, they make cars. It's not bad that Stanford's trying to charge more for their next colonoscopy. As soon as you get past that one weird cultural norm where you actually made a donation there the other day. So that's what's going on in healthcare. It's the same. The long pole in the tent is that there is vastly more fixed cost capacity than we need, 200 to 300% excess fixed cost capacity. So you go to a medical center, and we do this with our executives. They go to Harvard Medical School for a month, in little chunks, and they go through floors, and they check off with a doctor who actually needs to be in a medical center, who could have had this at an urgent care, who actually would better have had this at home, virtually. And you find that once you do that, that floor went from full to empty. So that fundamental challenge of how do we digitize and virtualize medicine, and then basically Airbnb the shit out of it, remains the opportunity. And for the medical centers that do, I'm picking up Stanford randomly because it's not you. Basically, it's the only reason they've got a lot of folks that are tertiary medical trained experts that are spending 80% of their day on secondary and primary care to feed the beast. I got my knee fixed a year and a half ago. I wrote about it was a section on, he's the third largest, highest volume knee surgeon in Boston. And the year that I hired him, he did 238 knees, ACL repairs that year. So, fair amount of practice on it just in 1 year. But you got to remember, an ACL repair takes about 45 minutes to an hour. Allow an hour to psych yourself up and an hour to think about it afterwards. You still have capacity for like 1,000 or 2,000 of these things, right? And he got $4,800 from me, right? And he sort of uncomfortably said, I really like you to do it at Mount Auburn because you were referred by a primary care doctor who's in the Mount Auburn IPA, and she's going to be really mad at you if you don't. And I'm like, yeah, but don't you work on Fridays at an ambulatory surgical center? It's like, well, yes. Isn't that like a quarter of the cost? It's like, well, I don't know about the costs. I don't know about the costs. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to the ambulatory surgical center. I'm sorry, but we're self-insured. I don't want to spend an extra $20,000 on the same thing. And he's like, and by the way, like many fewer mistakes, because they can't do as many procedures at the ASC, so there's only a much smaller set of equipment to choose from, so it's much more consistent work, right? All of that was the point of the book, right? Is if I could have, I didn't make any money. The problem with medicine that I wrote about in the book, fundamental problem, and it's not just financial, it's emotional and spiritual, is that there's no demand curve. When somebody lowers their cost and lowers their price, they don't get any market share. And when they raise their price and operate like a slob, they don't lose any market share. That's incredibly screwed up. Right? And so we're like, how can we finance and cross-subsidize and tax and figure out a way to pay 6-7% more every year for something that isn't getting any better? Right? And it's a dilemma because it's a social good, and we don't want to say, let's cut people off, chase people out of the market so that people have to innovate to draw them back in the market, which would be something you'd do with cell phones or videos, and it would be very efficient. We don't want to do that, so we have a dilemma. But fundamentally, whatever we do to get out of it is going to involve the demand curve working. So and writing a book, if you're a dyslexic, involves hiring a man to write a book. And so I spent, 3 months with this guy. We started with like a week on an island in Maine, and I went through all my ravings. And he wrote back what we thought as a practice first chapter. And I read it, and I'm like, this guy sounds so angry. This is not me. And he's like, oh, that's you. And it's like, no, it's good. It's not bad. And he's like, well, you sound incredibly angry. And so I had to rewrite that chapter and find a way to say the things. Because to be direct, sometimes you want to, you have to be comfortable making someone uncomfortable, but you don't want to be negative. And I don't think that this is a negative story. I think what we can do in medicine is extraordinary. I mean, unfortunately, we witnessed it again in Las Vegas. We had it in Boston when we had a bombing, and every single person who wasn't killed instantly was saved in the case of Boston. And if you looked at what, all those folks at University Medical Center in Las Vegas and one of our clients at Sunrise Medical Center was able to do instantly, no warning, no planning, everybody falling into place. We are practiced at the art of craft-brewed, free-form break-fix at a level that has never been seen in the world, and it is profound to witness. What we need to do is keep that beautiful thing and figure out a long continuum of things that are more virtual and more appropriate to the problem between, fat kid on the couch who's going to get diabetes before he's 18 and that incredible experience of break-fix medicine that we're so good at. So that's I think, the idea of the book and the market. And yeah, don't worry, you can come in 5 years and it'll still be there to work on. Hopefully we will have made a lot of headway. Other questions? I also don't know what time, when you want to be done.
We got a little more time.
Okay.
Yep, there was a question here.
You want to shout it out and I'll repeat it?
Yeah, so I was
Yeah. Very good question. They don't need the money, or they need the money, but they think they're going to get it in a grant from NIH or a donation, right? Or just raise prices. And you're saying, no, I'm going to cut costs. And like, oh, I don't know. Like, we're the largest employer. Our congressman arranges all kinds of special treatment for us because we're such a large employer. And you're talking about laying people off. Normally, when you sell to a business, like, I can fire a lot of overhead. Thank you, you know. And medical centers, oh, God, we better have a meeting, you know. So there's a real challenge. What medical centers have in common in the absence of a demand curve is it's a popularity contest with doctors. A little bit like, for those of you so at Goldman, Dean Lyons, the traders were probably, they could be pretty big jerks and still keep their job. Maybe not the managing directors, but the traders, right? So Bloomberg figured this out. He worked in IT at a bank at Salomon Brothers. And he saw how much traction the traders got. He said, if I could make something that those traders couldn't do without, they would make the suits buy it. And so the Bloomberg machine is basically this unbelievably expensive, cumbersome thing that's miserable for everyone except the trader. And the trader marched in and said, you buy this fucking thing! You know, and they still today get $15,000, $18,000 per machine, and there isn't even a machine anymore. It's like a link to a website, you know? What? That is our model. Our goal is let doctors be doctors. Doctors spend, on average, 50% of their time not being doctors. 50. The faxes and the reports and everything. We've gotten it all the way down to 40. Just humiliating if it wasn't for the 50. Right? We think next year we'll get to 30. We've been doing a lot of pre-work that we think we're going to get a break on a lot of stuff. Like we can do their coding next year, and we can do their authorizations. A lot of what they do is authorizing something with the insurance company. So our goal with the hospital is to bring the doctor's engagement, promise the doctor's engagement with them if they use us. And say, look, instead of having doctors furious at you because of the EMR project, right, that you pushed on them, have them thank you because you gave them athenahealth. That's our fundamental sales strategy. That's our first horizon. You're not going to sell to the hospital until the doctors already love you and are pulling you along. And then you can sell. And then it's easy to go downstream, right, because you're bringing the doctor's referral with you, right? The instrument of monetization is the doctor's pen, or user ID, as the case may be. Yeah.
Chris Johnson of the Evening MBA program. You touched on it, referring to the demand curve. And one of the big issues I've always felt that the healthcare industry has is that consumers are disconnected from prices.
Correct.
They're disconnected from
so
costs.
So are doctors. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no price transparency. Do you have any thoughts on how to fix that?
There's no transparency of any kind. We, on average, do tests on patients 2.1 times. So you need a blood test or a pap smear or whatever. If you take all the times that we do it divided by all the times that we need it, including the people who don't get it at all, it's 2.1 times. So what we need is an internet, right? We need to be able to look up and connect, not just what stuff costs, but that stuff happened and where it happened and what the result was. So we've been working very hard. We got a big break last year with a law called the Cures Act or the Cures Bill or something. 21st Century Cures Act, which we helped write. It's America. Look, play ball, all right? We basically made it illegal for you to refuse to make an interface to a doctor who's treating a patient. So even if they don't work for you, but they have your patient, you have to give them electronically, not 25 cents a page in a fax, which they used to be the answer, electronic access to that thing. And that's breaking a lot of that information asymmetry down. My hope is that what comes next is price. All the payers have refused us access to their paid claims data unless we have a risk contract. If our customer has a risk contract, which is very common in California, California is on the vanguard of risk contracts and has gotten enormous benefit. The cost and coordination of care in California is 2x the national average in the right direction. As they give us that, so they've given us that, but we're not allowed to analyze it. You're not allowed to analyze it. do you mean I can't analyze? You can't say I can't analyze it. I'm looking at it. Oh, I just analyzed it. So they're losing that battle little by little. A lot of our large customers, we're saying, look, negotiate as part of your contract that they give you paid claims data on the patient just for the purpose of coordinating care. If someone's already been to the emergency room 3 times for the same thing, the doctor should know. And honestly, sometimes it's something that they don't want to talk about right away. That should be allowed, especially if the patient gives permission to see, that should be allowed. That's the beginning, and once that price gets on there, the government, I love banging on Donald Trump, but Tom Price, for his 7 minutes of power, allowed us to be a qualified entity, the first for-profit entity. Obama wouldn't let for-profits have access to the data because, I don't know why, actually, but we can now get all the master working files from CMS, from Medicare. So when a patient comes in, we don't have to give them the clipboard because we already know everything about them for the last 3 years. And that's a huge break in terms of information transparency. Those are the building blocks that will lead to that demand curve working. I think the other thing that's going on that will lead to it on the flip side, so this is what we're doing from the inside out. From the outside in, none of this policy shit has had any impact on cost. In fact, all it's done is accelerated the price increase. And so employers are going back to what they were doing in 2000, which is pushing more responsibility to the consumer. And now the consumer is in a position to shop for more and more and more of the food chain. So increased information transparency on the inside, increased personal benefit to shopping on the outside, and you'll start to see a demand curve kick in. Yeah.
I'm Emma Jeffries. I'm also a dual degree with Paul, and I spent 9 years in Boston Winters and used to work for Mass General. So
okay.
Super interested.
Well, everything I said about Stanford, of course, does not apply to Mass General.
I won't make public comment on how much I agree. This may be a softball, but what's so frustrating is that all these incentives are in place, but if you could redesign how healthcare is delivered, like what would you include? How would you set it up?
Yeah.
How would you set up?
There's a famous story where Lyndon Johnson is taking over after John Kennedy. And they're frantic, right? Because they want to win they want to cross demographics to win elections. And so it's all about the Great Society program and all these things. And one of the things that Kennedy was working on was this idea of the Medicare program. You can go back even further to Eisenhower, who was trying to keep price inflation after the war down. And so he basically put some wage caps on raises. So employers go and lobby, and it's like, well, how do I get around this? I'm like, well, can we buy them a company car? Because what if they need it for travel? So the creation, for a while, it was killed by activist investors and other people, rationally and appropriately, killed the company car thing. But that was a while a pre-tax company car used to be a thing. It was an artifact created in order for employers to compete for, GIs, et cetera, in a wage cap environment. So was making the cost of healthcare a pre-tax benefit. So suddenly you created a step between the consumer, the beneficiary, and the purchaser. For the best of reasons, you're trying to keep hyperinflation after the war from happening. Then Johnson has got his big cowboy boots on the desk, and he's like, well, this whole Medicare thing, and we're not exactly sure how much it'll cost. But at the time, early 70s, it was 10,000%, 9,724% cheaper per capita, inflation adjusted, than it is today. It's a much smaller deal. And they're like, well, we could either do and they basically were deciding between a sort of a 401k defined benefit plan like Medicare, where you just get a check and it's like, this is your health care check to go buy health care, or some things would be hospitalized and some, certain hospitalizations would be covered and then you'd get a check, but the amount that was covered was smaller. And the other was everything except for drugs, and at the time drugs was not that big a deal, and then there was drugs. And Johnson was like, well, how much is the one where it's all the doctors and hospitals? And they're like, well, right now it would be like 1% of the budget, 1% of the federal government budget. But we don't know how much it'll go up once it's free to people. And he said, well, hell, how bad could it possibly get? That's the quote. Anyway, try 24% of the federal government. So that's how it sort of began. Typically, the way things change is from the outside in. So if, in fact, consumers, non-participants, now we have many fewer non-participants because we just insured lots of people that were actually preferring to buy and trade around the edges, because it just wasn't a good deal to buy insurance. It's still an incredibly bad deal. Insurance for 50% of us is an incredibly negative NPV purchase versus, either insuring only the things that, we call it health insurance, but it's not health insurance, it's health payment, right? You're gonna get healthcare treatments every year or every couple, so it's not really insurance like it used to be where you'd have this rare treatment. So I think the way the demand curve comes out is from the outside in. I think that non-participants or partial participants, I expect that the number of Americans that carry, let's say 10 times the amount of money in their checking account as a healthcare liability will increase tenfold in the next 3 or 4 years. And those people will have a big nut over their head. And they're going to start asking serious questions about a lot of the famous population health studies that are wrong, all wrong. The big Kaiser study that said, the best thing is to take the money and buy the preventative care, otherwise they won't get the preventative care and it'll be bad for their health. And we've now done a study that says that 80% of that spend is actually behaviorally determined care anyway. So the preventative screening is actually, you're screening against a certain set of cancers and heart diseases that are nothing compared to the diabetes and other diseases that you'll get through your behaviors. All these crowds of people that are going to start carrying big liabilities are going to start redoing all those studies with the wisdom of crowds and creating alternative healthcare systems. Nobody's going to go to the doctor. I mean, why? You just get a visit. And then there'll be a lot of lobbies around, wait a minute, you saying the only reason I went to the doctor is to get a prescription for a thing that I already know I'm fine with because I Googled it? You mean literally this is, because doctors, part of what they have is a guild where you need a drug, you could know it's available, you could know it's safe, but they have the magic key. And you can't get through without their magic key. All of that stuff, as consumers individually have more of a personal and specific dog in the hunt, will push down on those previously like wrong, but who cares because someone else is paying type of elements.
I think, if we haven't got a sense of the wide open road in front of us from this wonderful talk, I don't know what would do it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you guys very much.